Good afternoon, it's Joyful Hermit. I hope this is louder. I'm experimenting with this again for the sound. I'm going to talk today about, I have so many topics, but I'm going to talk about how I first started focusing in on awareness of how to open myself up to God to communicate with me and for me to communicate better with God. Up until about I was 35, I just automatically would perceive or think or hear things from God, or sense things going on in a house, or like a nursery school house where we lived in the house, but there was a quaint little nursery school behind, and we ran and operated the nursery school. My husband at the time was an elementary teacher, but I stayed home with the children and our two little girls, and um, augmented directing the nursery school. We had a hired director, teachers, a staff of 9, and then I developed the curriculum and did different things like that, arranged field trips and speakers to come in for the children, and handled things in that realm and taking enrollments and such. So, but we had a child ghost in that house, or a spirit of some sort of, and first thought it was poltergeist, but um, that was back. I just sort of laugh about it, but I would be aware of these things. My husband witnessed things. I didn't realize at the time it was freaking him out, but to me, it was just part of life, part of my existence, that these things would happen, and I would got rid of it, and so anyway, but it did affect our oldest daughter when she was 4. She would talk with this. And all we could figure was that it was, or I did, that it was a spirit of a child that was lost and had come there, either had been a student there because it was maybe 25 or 30 years old. The school had been there a while. And we were just new owners and inhabitants of the home, the old Grove home, or it was a child that had lived in that old Grove home. But I guess I'll talk about that another time, the different things that would happen and how I recognized how I dealt with it. But the when after my divorce and I went back into teaching in the classroom, had the 3 children, had terrible back and neck pain, headaches all the time, from the car accident in 1984, I would be exhausted at night and had no time. I read a little bit of the Bible, but not much. No time to, I was wanted to read a lot. My soul was being opened up. And one night I prayed, and told the Lord, please deal with me in the night. Teach me in the night. I can't devote my time and my thought during the day. I have to be responsible for 5 classrooms of high school students, 150 or more students a day. And I had to teaching English, which was a lot of grading of papers. And I had to attend to a 2-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 9-year-old, or not quite 9 then, but yeah, it was rugged, and deal with divorce situations and low finances all of a sudden, and we had to move from one place that the police felt that he had hired people to ransack it and to keep stealing and vandalizing. 7 times or so in 6 months. We had to leave suddenly then. One after the last time. It was too violent of a ransacking and breaking into. We weren't safe there, the police said. And that's all they could figure. No one else was having even anything stolen. So um, got into an apartment eventually after we had to farm out to different people taking us in until this apartment was available. And it was right beside the manager's apartment, so we'd be more safe. That's what the police really recommended. Um, so we'd have some kind of security, so that if they felt it was the ex-husband hiring these things done to us, that would be harder for him to get away with anything if we had the apartment right beside the apartment managers. So that was in the apartment. And that first night after I prayed that, I had a dream. And I was being wrestled with by a Hispanic gardener. And it had a lot of symbolic meaning from the Bible, from the Old Testament, where I think it was Jacob who had been wrestled by an angel. He didn't know at the time it was an angel, but he knew then when he got out of this experience. And his hip was injured in it. He had a muscle was torn in his hip as a sign, as a remembrance of him being wrestled by this angel. And and he called the place that happened Bethel. God is surely in this place. And so I reread that portion in the Bible, trying to understand why God was having this angel, probably, but in the form in my dream of a Mexican gardener. At the time, we lived in Southern California, and there were a lot of Hispanic laborers. We lived in a town that was the avocado capital of the country. Small town, but lots of acreage around, and with avocado groves. So they worked in the groves, and I think God, what I understood was that God would work through me in ways I would understand and be able to relate with in my everyday life. Well, I had read, I had taught a semester at Beverly Hills High where we had lived before. My husband had gotten a principalship there and then had lost his position. They didn't put up with a philandering principal. They had standards. Those parents expected quality. And he was messing around with teachers and district office person and I think one was a speech therapist who would go to the different schools and at his school and involved with her. And then when he had left me and the 3 children, and he had insisted I take this 1 semester position and had also insisted I only take 2 courses at USC that semester. Had I taken 3, I would have been eligible for a more honorable titled degree than my regular doctorate. But he said, if I didn't do this, or if I didn't do that, he started setting out these conditions that he would divorce. And we had a baby that wasn't yet 2, and these 2 beautiful little girls. The school I had them in was top notch, and they were bright girls, and I was doing anything to keep our family unit together. At that point in time, I didn't realize he was a narcissistic sociopath, and that was serious personality disorder, serious pathological lying, philandering, and frightening. When they turn on you, it can mean they can hire someone to kill you or cause your life to be hell when they do leave you, because they do leave you when their game is up, when you start seeing through them. And I had started seeing through him, but I didn't realize all these attributes to a narcissistic sociopath, or the danger, or the cruelty and the evil that they live in, and the energy they expend on playing this game. And they're very intelligent people, not super. He wasn't a great student or anything like that. He was a hard worker, and they're very charming, very manipulative, and smooth, and they trick people. He had lied himself, I didn't realize until later, into his positions, into it. But we were always moving. Every 2 to 3 years, he would get a different position after he was out of the classroom, in which he then was, the first few years of our marriage, he was a classroom teacher, elementary, fourth grade, but he got into the teachers' union. He did not like authority figures, and he was very anti-administration until he became an administrator, because he liked then to have that power. But he was in a teachers' union and was having affairs with those women, other teachers then. So, and also he got his master's at a state school in administration. Took him a year to get it or something. And of course, he wanted me to type and correct all his papers, which I did, idiot that I was. But anyway, you just don't realize what you've married when they're that way. And you can go for years like that not knowing, because they lie about anything they don't even have to lie about. And their whole life is a lie, and you don't know any different. You don't know any differently. But I had signals from God that I ignored or shoved down because it was too painful. And we already had this family, and I thought maybe he would outgrow his philandering over time. And then I even got to the point where I thought I could live with him cheating if he cheated the rest of our lives to keep the family together, or at least until the children were grown and out on their own. But of course, a narcissistic sociopath cannot do that. So there I was praying and had that dream immediately with biblical significance. It was a good significance that an angel had wrestled with me during the night. I knew that God was saying, I am with you, and angels will guide you. At the time, I wasn't Catholic, but a teacher at Beverly Hills High, an art teacher, was a Catholic, and I sat at his table with other teachers. And he started talking about this book written by a Quaker, Richard Foster. I'm forgetting right now the name of the book. Celebration of Discipline. And it was uncanny. It was the first time they invited me to sit at their table at lunchtime. And he focused in on me. I didn't know him. We weren't in the same department or anything. He was art teacher. And said, you need to read this book. For some reason, the Holy Spirit touched him to touch me. So, a year later it was, and I was in a whole different area, a lesser cost of living in California than Beverly Hills area. And because my income plummeted. And so I got that book and was reading it, and he was quoting a lot of Thomas Merton in it, this Quaker, Richard Foster. And Thomas Merton mentions in some of the quotes or the comments in Richard Foster this book by Morton Kelce, who was a professor at Notre Dame, but an Episcopalian. And I think he may have been an Episcopalian psychologist who taught psychology or such at Notre Dame. And Morton Kelce had written a book on dreams. I think How to Work with God Through Dreams or something like that. But I think the title of it mainly was Dreams. And I got that book and read it. And in that book, I gained a lot of knowledge. Had I already been Catholic, and this art professor, art teacher at the high school in Beverly Hills, was Catholic. And he had a sense about him. All my life, growing up, I knew Catholic people, not often, because I grew up in a family that didn't go for Catholicism whatsoever. And in a town where there was a divide between the Protestants and the Catholics. So, but I always sensed in the Catholic people I met, a neighbor girl when I was growing up, when I was little, and then in high school, a neighbor girl who was Catholic. And her father had been a Methodist minister who converted to Catholicism and was a writer himself, Dale Francis, and an editor at a Catholic publishing house in the town I grew up in, Our Sunday Visitor. And I sensed something as a teen and as a child in Catholics that I would meet. Something in them seemed special and unique. I never pinpointed it until I myself went to a mass for the first time. But anyway, that's for another conversation too. But Morton Kelce's book was what I needed because I would have blacked out anything Catholic. In fact, I was intrigued by Thomas Merton. I liked his writing style from what was quoted in some of his earlier writings in the Celebration of Discipline book. But it would, to have a Catholic writer, or had I gotten, St. Ignatius of Loyola's spiritual disciplines and read that, I would not have gotten a per se Catholic book. It wouldn't have, I would have had too much blockage in me to feel comfortable. I would have been too skeptical from my upbringing, including my beloved grandmother, who, no, Catholics, no. So, but God was leading me in at that point in time. And Morton Kelce, being a professor at Notre Dame, that was about close enough, that I felt okay, but he was Episcopalian himself. And I had tried Episcopalian, lasted 6 months. It seemed like make-believe Catholic, there was nothing there, and the priest was sort of a mess, and not super moral person, and no, why do that? I thought, even at the time, I thought, why be pretend Catholic if you're gonna be the real thing, So, because Henry VIII is the one that basically developed the Church of England, because he was angry that as a Catholic himself, he couldn't just divorce every wife he wanted to until he could have a male heir. So that's how he, it's developed by a human being again. So, and under immoral pretenses. Anyway, Morton Kelce in his book would talk about discernment of spirits, and if you want God to talk to you through dreams, you need to bind the devil from you. So at night, he recommended how to do this, so I followed right along his protocols, that you pray before you go to sleep, asking God to speak to you in your dreams, but to make sure the devil was not allowed in. Or if God somehow allowed the devil for our own training and learning how to deal with the devil, that we would recognize and learn to discern what dreams are from the devil, what dreams are from something we ate or stress in our lives that are in the imagination, the image level of our minds, or the emotional level of our minds, that we are taken off into something that is us infiltrating the dream rather than God. And how to discern then God's voice, or be prepared if an angel comes into the dream. And then I think he mentions, that They can come in different forms. If we're not ready for an angel, as a Protestant in the churches I was in, angels were in the Bible, and dreams were used in the Bible, but not in our lives. That was back then. And that isn't for us. No, 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 you don't mess with those things. But Morton Kelce bridged that gap for me in his book. And I became less fearful. So I prayed the prayer and asked God, and I started having God work with me in the night. And he would, one night, it was a dream, just the words across the black background, and a voice saying in the dream, the ninth book. And so I was getting used to this, and I could tell that that was something good. There was nothing at all else in the dream, only that. And I knew God was working with me, because I always liked to read mysteries. And even as a child, I used to think, oh, I'd like to be in the FBI or the Secret Service or undercover, following clues. And then I also, grew up wanting to be a mystery writer. And I never did, but I loved reading mysteries and having things unfold. And God knew this about me. He knows this about me. So he started giving clues through the dreams, knowing that I would go on this little hunt and seek. So I had to get up, get the children up, get the baby up, change the diapers, and everyone fed, and off to their schools, onto the bus, the baby to the sitter, me drive a half hour to the school I was teaching in. And there was it was across the hall from the library, and this sweet older librarian woman, somehow she took to me in a special way and knew I was undergoing a terrible time period in my life, and was very sweet. And she had a peaceful soul. I sensed that in her. At the time, I didn't realize I have this innate sense of spirit or of people. And with my ex-husband, I was totally duped from the get-go with him. Totally duped. And I have to grasp that that was part of my life and my learning experience in life. And that somehow that was what God intended or allowed. He allowed me that because I prayed before marrying him, but I wasn't open to listening. I think that was the case. But God knew there were these souls that I would be giving birth to and bringing into the world. And this Dr. H, the psychologist who worked with the children then, and then also started working with me with my pain and surgery and things, but he also explained, this is your children's legacy. The father they have, the mother they have, the life they're going to have. This is part of what God has allowed for their lives, for them to learn and grow. And I think their strength and their success out in the temporal world, their work ethic, came about because of the responsibility they had with a mother in severe pain, and our financial status after the surgery where I was permanently disabled. And they, working after school in high school was automatic. They wanted to earn money. Working through college, studying hard to get loans and grants and scholarships, and they have very responsible and amazingly well-paying jobs and wonderful lives. So anyway, the ninth book, I asked Winnie, the librarian, do you know any books titled The Ninth Book, or anything to do with the ninth as the title? And she knew enough of me that she knew this was somehow important to me. And I think maybe by lunchtime when I ran over and I would have lunch in my room, I would lay on the floor because my back's so bad. And I said, I think I might have said it was in a dream. I need to find out what this is. And she even called the main library of the town, and they didn't have any in their catalog. It was before computerized everything. And she said, I wonder if it's the Bible, the ninth book of the Bible or something. How she came up with that, other than I didn't wear a crucifix at the time. How she came up with that, but she did the Holy Spirit. So I went home and went from the beginning in, and it was First Samuel was the ninth book. After the children were in bed and asleep, I started reading First Samuel. And I got to the ninth chapter of First Samuel, the ninth book of the ninth book of the Bible. And there, in the ninth chapter, verse maybe it's chapter 16, verse 9. It's the one, and it's talking about Saul, and Saul is becoming evil against David, and is resenting David, and is bothered by David, and is going to undermine David. And but the verse is, the Lord looks at the man looks at the outer appearance. The Lord looks at the heart. And that very year, the principal of this high school I was in started to turn on me. He was intrigued by me. And I remember one time I was sitting looking out of a window during break, and it was around the time of the divorce going to be finalized. I was exhausted. The ex either hired someone or I think he hired someone. I would get phone calls in the middle of the night repeatedly, the week before we were to go to court, to exhaust me further. And it was at a time where, I couldn't just turn off the phone. I could have, I guess, taken the thing off, but it was after we'd been through this trauma. I wanted to always have access to my phone, or if anyone called me, to be able to answer, such as my elderly parents. And at the time, I didn't think, but I kept getting these calls. So I was exhausted, and this principal, one time, he came up from behind me and just put his hands up on my cheeks and stood there. It was sort of creepy. I was a sweet young thing then. I didn't have scars and wrinkles and old and wizened and beaten down by suffering. But anyway, that gave me the creeps. And then it ended up, but I knew that God was telling me, this is your Saul to your David. And he is going to be treacherous. And sure enough, I was forced to change a student's grade. Well, I refused to change it. So they took the student out of my class, but the guidance counselor changed the grade from a D to a C so that kid could play football. But he was rude and disruptive in class, and he didn't do his homework, and he was failing his tests. So he was fortunate to be getting a D in my class. And I had called his parents to try to get them to understand what he was doing and how he was behaving, thinking they would get on top of him. Because I said, with this grade, he's going to be off the football team temporarily until he pulls it up. Well, they created holy hell with the principal, who turned on me. And then they even took the kid out of my classroom, and he was mocking. And the teacher who got the student was sort of putting it over on me. Well, you just couldn't handle this student. You don't relate with the students. So I had that hanging over me on top of everything else, that I couldn't cut it as a teacher or whatever, that, or the student would have loved my class. So that was a sense of defeat. And then my spine was giving up also. Anyway, so God let me know this, so I knew how to accept and deal as David did with Saul. I tried to respect and to pray for the principal, but I knew that trouble was going to be mine and that I had to watch my back all the time. And as it turned out, it ended up, I think I lost something like 5 weeks of teaching toward the end of school because my back totally gave out. I was hospitalized over spring break. By then, I knew more people in the Lutheran church we were in, and they took the children, but it was terrible. So, and that was a lead-in then to, and I was starting to have many dreams of God showing me that I would not be teaching, and later, and I wasn't. I never really wanted. I knew that that was not my best gift, more leadership and creative. And I was a very spiritual person. But I couldn't change careers at that point. I didn't have the income to do that or to stop working. So, but God in dreams was telling me of these things. And also many, many more things. The dreams and the voice, being told in the dreams. And then also then a vision started happening. But I learned to discern the spirits, and that's very important to learn. If you open up to God working through dreams with you, and then opening up, then God leads you into other ways that he'll interact with you, very real ways in your daily life. And in however ways you can, because we have to be focused in the temporal responsibilities we have in this temporal world. Today, I need to get out and try to do a little manual labor to build up a little energy and to try to move my knee more and see if I can cope with the pain better. So I can't just go off in spiritual ecstasy or meditation or reading what I'd like to read or doing videos and talking about these things. I could talk 24 hours of spiritual and religious and Bible. I love this. This is who I am and what I was created for. But I live in the temporal world with the temporal body that requires effort to keep it going, and a place to live that requires. So this is why God will work through us in various means if we want to spiritually grow. And make sure you do take time out, though, at night when all your duties are done, or I would restart reading my Bible during my lunch period at school. Reading the Bible is crucial to staying close to God. Old Testament, Psalms, New Testament, it's crucial. The Gospel of John is beautiful. Hebrews, whatever, all of Paul's epistles, whatever books God leads you to, ask God, where do you want me to start in the Bible? The answer might come from someone in your everyday life. I had a woman, my daughter wanted to play Little League. She didn't want to play the girls' softball. So she played Little League before that was a thing. And I got some grief from some of the other mothers. But one of the mothers was wonderful, very accepting, and thought how great. And she sat by me, whereas the other mothers didn't want to. And we got to talking. Out of the blue, she starts saying, I think you would like reading This book, uh, it's called the Seven-Story Mountain. It's by Thomas Merton. Oh, Thomas Merton. I remember his name from this Quaker's book, In Celebration of Discipline. And I liked his writing. So I got that book, The Seven-Story Mountain. I didn't realize Merton was a Cistercian monk. And he had been, I don't know what he'd been growing up, an agnostic or something, but he converted to Catholicism, and he'd actually taught a year at St. Bonaventure University, ironically, where my son ended up going to college. So a lot of connections there. But I started reading Merton's book. And later on, that led me into reading his early books. I try to read things from the first on in people. And it was a good thing, because if I had read Merton's later books, when he got off kilter from Christianity and into Buddhism, fascinated with Buddhism, which I studied Buddhism in my seeking, but I wouldn't have if I had made vows as a Cistercian monk and priest. Maybe I would have studied it some, but I wouldn't have become so enamored with it that I was leading all my readers into Buddhism. I felt it wasn't conscionable. If you want to go that route, and you are, and at the same time, Merton was having an affair with a young student nurse, half his age or less. So he went really off the deep end at the end of his life, the last 2 to 3 years, and God plucked him out. He was electrocuted, and he was doing a lot of traveling and speaking and got involved in the war movement, fine, but not when you're a Cistercian monk and priest who has a vow of silence and contemplation. So he got off, and God plucked him out of life. Fine, whatever. I'm not judging other than such as myself. If I would start becoming enamored with something else, or I decided to chuck the hermit life that God called me to, and for good reason, he knew ahead of time, which I'll get into when I talk about my death experience. And my grandmother had forewarned me that, you're going to have to live a life hibernating like a bear. Well, i.e., if she had said as a hermit, I would have freaked. God works with us in ways to where we are and what we will cope with and understand. So I think in another video I'll talk about discernment of spirits. This has gone on too long already. I tell you, I probably should do an outline so I stick with the topic. My life goes off into so many experiences and strands, but and I probably just need to write a book where I could edit it and go chronologically, or several volumes, because I'm also talking to you now about how God was subtly leading me into Catholicism from 10 years back, from the art teacher at Beverly Hills High who was Catholic, or maybe even beyond that when I was a teenager and a girl 5 years old whose neighbor friend was Catholic, and I sensed something in her. So if maybe if you want to start with asking God and bind the devil, say, God, bind the devil from my dreams, or give me the means to know if things go on in your dreams that are not good, that distress you in a way that is a distress that makes you uneasy or tempts you to discouragement or fear in a way that is not something you're learning to work through, it's not good then. you should feel a sense of assurance, a sense of being given clues or a greater understanding or some um, reach into the Bible or someone in your life or someone who you knew who was a trusted, good person, like my grandmother came to me, my beloved grandmother. So otherwise, it's not. And if it's something very temporal, then you know it's temporal. But don't just brush aside if it's temporal immediately, because God works through the temporal, because we are in the temporal as well as spiritual beings. So that's enough. God bless His real presence in you, and I'll see about doing more on discernment. You can look on YouTube. I would trust Father Robert Barron, Barron. He has a 30-minute YouTube video on how to discern spirits. And there's an author on discernment of spirits, Tim Gallagher, who takes the Ignatian teachings on how to discern spirits and makes it accessible in our time period. But you can read those books. They're on Amazon. Or watch the video with Father Robert Barron, who would be a trustworthy person to explain to you how to discern spirits, to know the good spirits, the bad spirits, and even the in-between. God bless His real presence in us, and let us pray to love as God loves, to love in God, and to love God in Himself.